Sophia Alvarez had spent most of her 27 years crafting a life she could be proud of. Born to hardworking immigrant parents in the Bronx, she'd climbed her way out of poverty through sheer determination and a scholarship to NYU. With her degree in architecture, she envisioned a future filled with purpose. But all her carefully laid plans unraveled one fateful spring evening. The scene was almost cinematic, a rooftop restaurant overlooking the shimmering lights of Manhattan. Seated across from her was Gregory Maxwell, the man she'd spent 3 years believing was her forever. Gregory wasn't just any man. He was a millionaire real estate mogul, heir to the Maxwell empire, and the sort of man who turned heads wherever he went. With his tailored suits and effortless charm, he was everything her younger self had dreamed of, but never truly understood. Sophia had thought tonight would be the night. Gregory had been unusually attentive, even hinting that there was a special surprise waiting for her. The waitress's sly smiles and the faint glint of a jewelry box-shaped bulge in Gregory's pocket only fed her hopes. "You've been so patient with me," Gregory began, his hazel eyes fixed on hers. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Sophia's heart raced. This was it. But his next words shattered her world. "I can't do this anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia blinked, trying to process his words. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Gregory sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Look, you're amazing, Sophia. But I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I don't think we're right for each other. I mean, our lives are just different. You're great, but I need someone who fits into my world effortlessly. And I don't think that's you." Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "So, that's it? After 3 years, you just decide I don't fit?" "It's better this way," he said, his tone maddeningly calm. "You deserve someone who can give you everything, and I—" "Don't you dare say it's for my benefit," she snapped, finally finding her voice. "If you didn't see a future, why string me along? Why this whole charade tonight?" Gregory looked uncomfortable for the first time. He glanced away, muttering, "I thought it would be easier this way." Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The curious gazes of nearby diners burned into her back, but she didn't care. "Easier for who, Gregory? You. You're a coward." She left without another word, the diamond bracelet he'd gifted her last Christmas feeling like a shackle on her wrist. Months passed, but the sting of Gregory's betrayal lingered. Sophia threw herself into her work, determined to rebuild the pieces of her shattered confidence. She avoided the glossy magazines featuring Gregory with his new girlfriend, a socialite named Amanda. She ignored the whispers of her colleagues who speculated on why he had broken things off so abruptly. Then, the unexpected happened. One evening, Sophia fell ill at a client meeting. At first, she dismissed it as stress, but a visit to the doctor confirmed the truth. She was pregnant. The news hit her like a freight train. As shock gave way to a complex web of emotions, fear, joy, uncertainty, Sophia resolved one thing: Gregory Maxwell didn't deserve to know. He'd walked out on her when she'd needed him most. She wasn't about to give him the chance to do it again. Her decision wasn't easy. As her belly grew, so did the challenges. Gossip swirled when her pregnancy became apparent, with coworkers and clients making their own assumptions. But she endured it all, drawing strength from the tiny lives growing inside her. By the time her twins were born, 2 girls, 2 boys, Sophia had transformed into someone unbreakable. She didn't need Gregory's wealth or approval. She had her children and her ambition, and that was more than enough. Or so she thought. Years later, fate would intervene, and the man who once abandoned her would reappear, dragging her into a battle she never saw coming. The years after her quadruplets were born were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and fierce determination. Sophia had built a life she could be proud of. She'd turned her small freelance architecture practice into a thriving firm, specializing in sustainable urban design. Her children, Olivia, Emma, Lucas, and Noah, were her world, each with their own vibrant personalities. Though it hadn't been easy, she'd created a stable, happy home. Her parents helped when they could, but Sophia's resilience carried them through the hardest days. By the time the kids were 4, Sophia felt like she'd found her rhythm. Then Gregory Maxwell appeared, and everything came crashing down. It started on a crisp autumn morning as Sophia walked her kids to preschool. She held Olivia and Emma's hands while Lucas and Noah darted ahead, racing each other to the school gates. Sophia laughed, her heart full as she called after them, "Slow down, you two." That's when she saw him. Gregory stood near the school's entrance, leaning casually against a sleek black car. He was dressed impeccably, as always, his tailored coat and polished shoes a stark contrast to the bustling chaos of the preschool drop-off. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Sophia's stomach dropped. Memories of that rooftop dinner, his cold dismissal, and the years of pain that followed surged back like a tidal wave. She tightened her grip on her daughter's hands, instinctively pulling them closer. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Gregory's gaze shifted to the children, and something flickered in his expression: shock, confusion, recognition. "Sophia," he said, his voice soft but steady. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she snapped, trying to maneuver past him. But Gregory stepped into her path, his hand outstretched. "Please. Just give me 5 minutes." Sophia hesitated. She didn't owe him anything, but the intensity in his eyes unnerved her. Reluctantly, she nodded, motioning to her mother, who was nearby, to take the kids into the school. As they disappeared through the doors, Sophia turned to Gregory, arms crossed. "Make it quick," she said. Gregory hesitated, as though searching for the right words. "I didn't know," he said finally. "Didn't know what?" she replied, her tone icy. "About them." "The kids," he said, gesturing toward the school. "I had no idea, Sophia. You never told me." Her laugh was bitter. "You made it clear that I wasn't part of your world, Gregory. Why would I bring children into the equation?" "That's not fair," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I would have been there if I'd known." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Would you? Like you were there when I needed you the first time? You left me, Gregory. You don't get to waltz back into my life just because you feel entitled to something now." Gregory's face hardened, and for a moment, the polished mask he wore slipped. "They're my children, too," he said firmly. "I have a right to know them." Sophia's chest tightened. She'd known this day might come, but she wasn't prepared for the raw fear and anger coursing through her. "You don't get to decide that," she said, her voice trembling. "You gave up that right when you walked away." Gregory took a step closer, his tone softening. "Sophia, I made mistakes. I was young and selfish, and I've regretted it every day since. Please, let me make it right. Let me be part of their lives." Her resolve faltered for a split second before she shook her head. "It's too late, Gregory." She turned to leave, but his next words stopped her cold. "If you don't let me see them, I'll take legal action." Sophia froze, her mind reeling. She spun around, her eyes blazing. "You wouldn't dare." "I don't want to fight you," Gregory said, his expression pained. "But they're my kids, too. I'll do whatever it takes to be part of their lives." Sophia stared at him, her breath coming in short, furious bursts. "You want to drag me to court? Fine. But don't think for a second that I'll make this easy for you." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, her heart pounding. As she reached the car, her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel. She glanced in the rearview mirror, her reflection pale and strained. Gregory Maxwell was back, and he wasn't just a ghost from her past. He was a storm threatening to destroy everything she'd fought so hard to build. Sophia's days became a whirlwind of preparations, consultations, and overwhelming anxiety. The moment she received the official court summons, she knew Gregory wasn't bluffing. He was seeking partial custody of her quadruplets, and the sheer audacity of it made her blood boil. "I can't believe this," Sophia fumed during a late-night conversation with her best friend, Carla. "After abandoning me, he thinks he can just march back into my life and play dad?" Carla, always the practical one, took a sip of her tea and leaned forward. "Soph, he's got money. A lot of it. He's going to use every resource he has to make this happen. You need to be prepared." Prepared. The word felt like a mountain she wasn't sure she could climb. But Carla was right. Sophia wasn't the same scared young woman Gregory had walked away from. She was a mother, a business owner, and a fighter. She hired a lawyer the next day, a sharp-tongued woman named Elaine Garber, who came highly recommended. During their first meeting, Elaine didn't sugarcoat the situation. "Gregory Maxwell has a spotless public image, an army of lawyers, and financial resources most people can't even fathom," Elaine said, her pen tapping against her notepad. "But you have something he doesn't." "What's that?" Sophia asked, skeptical. "The truth," Elaine replied, her eyes steely. "You've been raising these kids on your own. You're their anchor, their everything. We'll make sure the court sees that." Sophia nodded, her resolve hardening. "I won't let him take them from me." The first court hearing was a spectacle. Gregory arrived with his legal team in tow, his presence commanding as ever. Sophia couldn't help but notice how polished and composed he seemed, while she sat clutching her lawyer's notes, her nerves threatening to unravel. When Gregory took the stand, he painted a sympathetic picture of a man desperate to make amends. "I didn't know about my children until recently," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "Had I known, I would have been there from the beginning. I'm not asking to take them away from their mother, I'm asking for a chance to be part of their lives." Sophia's stomach churned as she listened. Gregory's words were calculated, every sentence designed to tug at the judge's emotions. She could see the courtroom starting to tilt in his favor, and it terrified her. When it was her turn, Sophia rose, her hands shaking as she approached the stand. She glanced at her lawyer, who gave her a reassuring nod. "Gregory Maxwell walked away from me when I needed him most," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I didn't hide my children from him out of spite. I did it because I couldn't trust him to stay. He abandoned me once, and I wasn't going to give him the chance to do it again, especially not to my kids." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Gregory's confident demeanor faltered. But the fight was far from over. The weeks that followed were grueling. Gregory's legal team dug into every aspect of Sophia's life, searching for weaknesses they could exploit. They questioned her work hours, her finances, even her decision not to inform Gregory of the pregnancy. Sophia, in turn, fought back with everything she had. She provided records of her children's achievements, detailed schedules of her care routines, and character testimonies from friends and colleagues. Each document, each piece of evidence, felt like another brick in the fortress she was building to protect her family. But the most harrowing moments came when the children were brought into the proceedings. A court-appointed child psychologist met with Olivia, Emma, Lucas, and Noah to assess their well-being and gather their thoughts about meeting their father. When the psychologist's report was presented in court, Sophia braced herself. While the children are happy and well-adjusted in their current environment, the psychologist began, they are naturally curious about their father. They've expressed interest in meeting him, but also voiced concerns about how it might change their lives. Sophia's heart broke as she imagined her children wrestling with questions they shouldn't have to face. She hated Gregory for putting them in this position. The turning point came during a private conversation between Gregory and Sophia, arranged by their lawyers to explore a potential compromise. They met in a neutral office space, the tension between them palpable. "I never wanted this to get ugly," Gregory said, his tone softer than she expected. "I just want to know my kids." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to waltz back in and pretend to be some noble father figure. You weren't there for them, Gregory. You weren't there for me." His expression hardened. "I made a mistake, Sophia. But punishing me doesn't help anyone. Don't you think they deserve to know where they come from?" Sophia hesitated, her resolve wavering for the first time. She'd spent years shielding her children from the pain Gregory had caused her, but was she also denying them something they needed? "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said finally, her voice trembling. "But if this is really about the kids, we'll find a way to make it work, on my terms." Gregory nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "That's all I'm asking." The court proceedings ended with a tentative agreement, supervised visits under strict conditions, with the possibility of expanded rights if Gregory proved himself. As Sophia walked out of the courthouse that day, her lawyer by her side, she felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, relief, and a faint, cautious hope. This battle wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like she might emerge with her family intact. Months passed since the court's decision, and the world Sophia had carefully built for herself and her children began to shift. Gregory's supervised visits were tentative at first, 2 hours at a local community center every other Saturday, with a court-appointed mediator present. Sophia watched from the sidelines during those initial visits, her stomach in knots as her children interacted with the man they now called Mr. Gregory. To her surprise, Gregory was patient and engaging. He brought books to read to the girls, built towers of blocks with the boys, and listened intently as all 4 of them chattered about their favorite cartoons and toys. Still, Sophia held her guard. People didn't change overnight, and Gregory had a lifetime of proving himself to do. One rainy Saturday, Gregory approached Sophia after a visit. She was helping Olivia zip up her raincoat when he spoke, his voice careful. "Can we talk for a minute?" Sophia straightened, her gaze wary. "About what?" He gestured to a bench under the awning of the community center. "Just, the kids. Please." She sighed, nodded, and followed him. They sat, the distant sounds of her children laughing with their grandmother filling the air. "I know I've hurt you," Gregory began, his tone quieter than usual. "And I don't expect you to forgive me anytime soon. But I want you to know. I'm not here to take them from you." Sophia studied him, searching his face for any sign of duplicity. "Then why did you drag us into court?" He winced, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. "Because I didn't know any other way to prove I was serious. You wouldn't let me in, and I panicked. It was wrong, and I'm sorry." His words didn't erase the months of stress and fear she'd endured, but there was something in his eyes, something vulnerable, that gave her pause. "What do you want, Gregory?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with exhaustion. He hesitated, as though the weight of his answer might crush him. "I want to be in their lives. To support them. And maybe, someday, I want them to see me as their father." Sophia's chest tightened. Being a father isn't about genetics or showing up when it's convenient. It's about consistency, sacrifice, and love. You'll have to earn that. Gregory nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. And I will." True to his word, Gregory began to show up in ways Sophia hadn't expected. He didn't miss a single visit, always arriving early and bringing thoughtful gifts, educational toys, art supplies, books. More importantly, he listened. When Lucas shared his fascination with dinosaurs, Gregory brought him a beautifully illustrated encyclopedia and promised a trip to the Natural History Museum someday. When Emma timidly admitted her fear of swimming, Gregory offered to sign her up for lessons, on his dime. Sophia watched it all with cautious hope. The kids were warming to him, their initial shyness melting away with each visit. But for Sophia, the wounds ran deeper. One evening, after a particularly joyful visit, Gregory approached her with an unexpected proposal. "I'd like to help more," he said, handing her a folder. Sophia opened it, her brows furrowing as she scanned the contents. It was a trust fund proposal for the children, with Gregory as the sole contributor. "I want to secure their future," he said, his tone sincere. "College, travel, whatever they need. This isn't about buying their affection, Sophia. It's about being responsible for them in every way I can." Sophia stared at the papers, her emotions a tangled web. It was a generous gesture, but it also felt like another reminder of his privilege, the resources he could provide that she couldn't match. "I'll think about it," she said, folding the papers carefully. Gregory nodded, respecting her boundaries. Months turned into a year, and the supervised visits transitioned into unsupervised outings. Gregory took the kids to parks, museums, and even a weekend trip to the zoo. Each time, they returned brimming with stories, their faces glowing with excitement. It wasn't easy for Sophia to let go, but she couldn't deny that Gregory was trying. He was no longer the man who had abandoned her on a rooftop all those years ago. The turning point came during Olivia's 5th birthday party. Sophia had planned a modest backyard celebration, complete with homemade decorations and a cake she'd baked herself. Gregory arrived with a gift for Olivia, a telescope, and to Sophia's surprise, he stayed to help. As the kids ran around the yard, shrieking with joy, Gregory approached Sophia, holding a plate of cake. "You've done an incredible job with them," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Sophia looked at him, her defenses softening. "I've had to." "I know," he said, his tone heavy with regret. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for not being there." Sophia studied him, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. For the first time, she saw not the man who had abandoned her, but the man he was trying to become. "Just don't let them down," she said finally. "That's all I ask." The road ahead wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, missteps, and unresolved emotions. But slowly, the walls between Sophia and Gregory began to crack. For the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future where her children had not just one parent who loved them fiercely, but two. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.